Okay, hi. Um, for fun, I brought my little sloth friend to say hi to you. Hi. She'll be back later. Okay, so in our critical thinking textbook in chapter 3, we're talking about uh, persuasion versus argument. And they make the point that persuasion is just to convince someone else to accept or adopt your position. And we can do that in a few different ways. We can offer them facts and opinions and reasons. We can make emotional appeals. But persuasion could also be, we're going to torture you until you decide to vote for our guy or girl. Persuasion could also be, I'm going to bribe you with this $20 bill so that you'll vote for whomever. Um, it could also be flattery, like, oh, you're looking so beautiful today. Why don't you vote for Miss X? So what we're doing is not strictly persuasion. We're doing a type of persuasion called argument, a word that you know. And with argument, we're using the classical appeals, logos, the appeal to logic, pathos, the appeal to emotion, and ethos, the appeal of credibility and trustworthiness, which you'll read more about in your textbook. The chapter also talks about reason versus rationalization, which you're going to discuss in one of your discussion threads. But I wanted to talk briefly about definition. So we have this section that talks about some procedures in arguments, so things that we might do when we're writing our argument. Nope, wrong one. There we go. Okay, sorry. All right, so when we're talking about the importance of definition, if our definitions aren't clear, our argument could just be totally lost on someone who doesn't understand what exactly we're talking about. And this is kind of a classic example. The concept of life. Does life begin at the fertilization of the egg? Some people think yes. Some people think no, life only begins when the heart starts to beat. And I'm sure people have other ideas as well. But if the claim that we're making is about abortion, our definition of life needs to be really clear so the audience understands our argument. So we have actually a few more types of synonyms, definitions than our book is talking about, but these are kind of the main ones. Definition by synonym. So this type of definition is usually not a complete one because very few words have exact synonyms. They're always just a little bit different. And we know, of course, a synonym is a word that means about the same. However, giving a synonym can be a good start at a complete definition. So for example, if you said to someone, we're experiencing lockdown, and they said, what is that? What do you mean? You might say, well, we're experiencing confinement. And if they know what confinement means, that gives them a lot better idea of what lockdown means. We also have definition by example. And this is really, really important because you should always be giving really specific examples in your writing. So back to the lockdown example. Somebody says, "What do you mean we're experiencing lockdown?" And you say, "Well, we're all staying in our houses. Many businesses are closed. Public events have been canceled, and we're staying 6 feet apart from each other." So there, I've given a few examples. So now they have a much better understanding of what we mean by lockdown. And then the last one that they talk about in our chapter is definition by stipulation. And a stipulation is just a condition or a requirement for something to happen. So our friend says, lockdown means we can't leave the house at all. And we say, well, we can't leave unless we need to go buy something essential like food. And we can go outside and take a walk or ride a bike. So when you give a stipulative definition, you're really talking about what you mean in this specific instance. Okay, good, good. All right, so sorry, hold on. I also wanted to look at syllogisms because one of the things that we're talking about also in this chapter is deduction or deductive reasoning. Syllogisms are these sets of 3 statements, and we start with a major premise. Then we move to a minor premise, and then we move to a conclusion. So with deductive reasoning, we're always starting with general, and then as we go down, we're moving to more specific. So the example the book always gives is kind of the classic one. All humans are mortal. That's our major premise. Minor premise, Socrates is a human being. So we think about it, okay, all humans are mortal. Socrates is a human being. Then we can conclude Socrates is mortal. So you see how we went from something really general, saying all humans are mortal, to something much more specific, Socrates is mortal. So I have a few examples. Here our major premise is all dogs are canines. All right, that's true. Our minor premise, Agatha is a dog. So we're getting a little bit more specific. And then we get even more specific with our conclusion. So we've thought, okay, if all dogs are canines and Agatha is a dog, that must mean Agatha is a canine. And that's correct. But just because statements are set up like this doesn't necessarily mean they're going to work. We could start with the major premise, all dogs have ears. So we'll accept that as true, yes, unless they have some horrible deformity. But we'll say all dogs have ears. Our minor premise, so we're getting a little more specific, we say, well, Agatha has ears. And we think, well, if all dogs have ears and Agatha has ears, then Agatha must be a dog. But not necessarily. Just because she has ears doesn't necessarily mean she's a dog. She could be a rabbit. She could be a sloth. She could be a cow or a horse or any other animal with ears. So we can't really go with this syllogism. It's not sound. Another example would be, we're starting with the major premise, all houses are blue, okay? More specific, the building on the corner is blue. Okay, well, if all houses are blue and the building on the corner is blue, the building on the corner must be a house. Except, wait a minute, what we started with, all houses are blue, that's not true. So if we start with something that's not true, we really can't go any further with it. If that were true, it would be a sound syllogism, but it's not true that all houses are blue. Um, and our book talks about the difference between what we mean by sound and what we mean by true and valid. So make sure that you pay attention to those distinctions. Okay, later we'll talk about induction, but I just wanted to give you some of the major points of this part of the chapter. And I'm going to post a couple of videos, or at least one video, about deductive reasoning and then another about inductive. So you'll get a better idea of what we're talking about. Oh, there I am. Okay, bye-bye. So see you soon.